Welcome to the Power in Motion podcast, the show for women who want to develop a kinder relationship with their body so you can feel healthy, happy, and confident without restricting food, doing torturous exercise, or constantly worrying about the number on the scale. I'm your host, Kim Hagel, size-inclusive fitness specialist and certified non-diet health and life coach specializing in body image. This podcast is here to provide weight-neutral, health at every size aligned information and coaching on sustainable habits and mindset shifts so you can feel your very best in the body you have right now. Let's lace up our runners and go for a walk while we chat. Well, hello, friend, and welcome back to the Joyful Movement Show. This is episode 98, and if you're listening to this in real time, this episode is being released on December 5th, 2022. So we're approaching the holiday season. And I have to tell you a story. My friend messaged me the other day and asked if I was ready for Christmas. I was like, what? No? Are you? I mean, it was the end of November at that time. I think it was maybe the 30th of November or something like that. So I was nowhere near ready. I mean, I'm starting to shift gears. My daughter was home this past weekend from college and she decorated part of the house. But the tree is still sitting in a box on the living room floor. Shopping has begun, but it's nowhere near being done. And baking, I don't know. That might happen or it might not. It'll be a game time decision. And truthfully, I'm usually a lot more prepared by this time. Normally by the US Thanksgiving weekend, I have the decorations all up. The shopping is done. I maybe have even started my wrapping. This year, I'm definitely not as organized. But you know what? It's totally okay. I really, honestly don't feel any stress about it. I know that the important things will get done. And if something does get missed or isn't done perfectly, that really doesn't stress me out. And I can contribute that relaxed feeling to being able to manage my inner people pleaser and giving myself permission to not have to do it all and do it all perfectly, which is exactly what our guest today is here to talk with us about. We're joined on the show today by life coach Unyime Oguta, whose passion is to help mothers and mothers at heart stop letting people-pleasing and perfectionism get in the way so that they can feel confident and create the life that they really want. Through her coaching practice, she equips moms with the mindset, strategy, and skills to help them elevate their self-image, become confident prioritizing themselves, and create the motherhood of their dreams without sacrificing their health and well-being. On this episode, Unyime shares her best tips to help you get through the holiday season without feeling like you need a holiday from the holiday. We discussed why we struggle with overwhelm during this season and what's really behind our perceived need to do it all perfectly. We also chatted about why our own self-care tends to go out the window when we find ourselves so busy and how we can keep ourselves on our priority list. And finally, we talked about why we tend to feel so out of control around food and how we can manage all the holiday food and drinks without feeling guilty and ashamed of our choices and like we need to start all over January 1st. It's a value-packed episode full of tangible tips to help you not only survive, but thrive this holiday. So I hope you enjoy. Well, hey there, Unyime. Welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you, Kim. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you back. I know, we talk pretty regularly, so I feel like I see you all the time, but our listeners haven't seen you or heard from you since back on episode 19, and we're almost at episode 100. So it's been a while since they've heard from you. And I'm really looking forward to this chat that we're going to have today about reducing our stress and overwhelm during the holiday season. But before we get into all of that, can you just maybe update us on who you are, what you do, maybe what's new in your life and your business since last we talked?
Sure. I think that was probably a year ago.
At least, yeah, more, almost closer to 2.
Yeah. So it's been a while and quite a bit has changed. For me, I'm still a mom. I'm still coaching moms and just being very passionate about helping moms thrive in motherhood. So if you listen to episode 19, you probably heard me talk about nutrition and food and body image and feeding kids. And I have since expanded my work to just coach moms on all things motherhood. And I'll just share here that my mission has always been to help moms thrive. And the more I coached moms, I realized, you know what? at the core of most of these behaviors, there's a lot of people pleasing and perfectionistic tendencies, which also happens to be the kind of people that I attract. Um, and I really just want to get in there and really give women back that power. Even though they have these tendencies, it doesn't mean that they can't live their lives. It doesn't mean they need to put their lives on hold. They can use it and propel themselves forward. So that's what I've been doing for probably the last 6 months, and it's been going great. So I'm really excited for our conversation today and just talking about stress and holiday.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've loved watching your business evolve into this broader sense of helping moms reduce stress and overwhelm in their life, or people pleasing and perfectionism, because it does manifest in food and body image and feeding kids, but it also manifests in lots of other ways. And one of those can be around the holidays, right? Like,
Mhm.
I think as moms, and well, just people, like, you know, all of us tend to feel a certain degree of stress and overwhelm just with life in general. And we'll talk about why that is. But with the holidays coming, that's a time where a lot of us can feel even more stress, even more pressure, and even more overwhelm. And what I tend to see in my practice with all of that holiday pressure is a drop off in attendance at the gym because people are just too busy with their stuff. But then there's all that guilt and shame that comes from not working out, and then guilt and shame that they're so supposedly overindulging in food and drinks. And then comes the perceived need to rein it all in and go on a strict plan once the new year comes, which is stressful too, right? The idea of having to go on a new diet or a hard exercise plan is super stressful. So that's why I invited you on. I thought it would be really helpful to give our moms or listeners here just some really tangible tips so that they can go into the holiday season a lot more relaxed and hopefully avoid all that guilt and shame and stress in the first place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm excited to chat about it.
Okay. So let's get started with the maybe not so easy question, but why do we feel so stressed out in the holidays in the first place?
I think if you ask anybody, they'd be like, oh, there's so much to do, right? It seems like that's the right sentence and the right response. But underneath that, I dare to push back and ask people, what does that mean? So I think we live in a society and the world in general right now is just in a place where there are certain seasons that certain powers that be have decided this is when we want to make lots of money. This is when we think everybody needs to come on board with what we're trying to do, all for our profits.
Mhm.
And the rest of us have bought into that belief whereby holiday season comes and it's all about consumerism. Let's buy, let's give, let's buy, let's give. And it somehow has become this thing where we feel left out. If we choose not to participate, then our nervous system goes into overdrive of, oh my goodness, this is terrible. It's the expectation, and we're all freaking out, right? So when we're thinking about, I'm just saying this because the work that I do with moms, yes, we do talk about mindset, but we really have to understand that when our nervous system doesn't feel safe, when we don't feel safe within our bodies, it does manifest into different behaviors. So let's talk about the behaviors. What do we do? Many of us are already struggling through the year with feeling like we're not worthy. We want to feel like we belong.
Mhm.
We want to feel like we have something to bring to the table. And all the messaging in media, on television, the ads, that is what is being sold to us. So when you're already someone who is struggling with your self worth, feeling like you're not enough, that is enough to make you want to try and prove yourself. And I always say this, even though people don't associate with people pleasing, the holiday does bring out everyone's inner people pleaser. It does bring it out. And you'll see like people would be like, well, I'm naturally not like this, but I'm just going to do it because that's what's expected. And I'm just going to focus for the 3 months or 2 months or whatever the celebration is. And then things will get better. Then I'll just go back to my life. And that's how you know that your inner people pleaser has come up because frankly, you're just like waiting for the season to be over so that you can go back to what's normal. And I want to say all of this is completely normal.
Mhm.
It is to be expected. It is to be recognized that it does exist. But we as individuals do have the power to be able to push back and make decisions that will serve us. So we still participate in the season because it's not all bad. Like I love being around people. I love that people get to be more generous
Mhm.
at this time of the year. And that's a great thing. But again, when something is great, it doesn't mean we need to go overboard. And we just need to figure out what works for me and how can I make this a memorable season where I'm not overwhelmed, where I'm not stressed, but I still get to enjoy.
Yeah. Yeah, that is excellent advice, and yet, I mean, if I had heard that, 2, 3, 4 years ago, I would have went, "Ah, yeah, but I have to go to all of the different parties because, my work is holding this one, my family is holding that one, I don't wanna let anybody down, I have to be there." And not only do I have to be there, I have to bake cookies to take with me, and they have to be homemade because if I buy them from the bake shop, everyone will know that I'm a cop out and I can't bake my own cookies. And I have to keep going to the gym because self-care matters. And I have to watch how much I eat while I'm at said parties. Right? So how do you help people filter through all those perceived shoulds? And like you say, it is your inner people pleaser coming out, but how do you filter through that and come back to what matters?
That's a great question. And I think it's a very loaded one because everyone's situation is different. But if we're looking at the general, like if we were to go general and look at the broader issues that a lot of us are experiencing, like I said before, it's very normal to feel this way. And one of the reasons why many of us feel pressured to do the have tos and shoulds is because we haven't learned how to manage the negative feelings that come from people being disappointed with us. We
Mhm.
don't know how to manage those negative feelings of, well, I wasn't included, or I'm seen as the bad person, or I'm seen as the party pooper. I'll tell you a story. So there were a few years back, I used to be filled with so much guilt because I hate baking. I do not like baking. It took me many years to accept that. And my husband loves it. Like he will bake a cake, he will do all the things. There are a few things that I do very well, and that's cinnamon buns.
Mm.
And I do make some chocolate chip cookies, those two. I can do that all day, but don't tell me to make like gingerbread cookies and all these things. And I remember my kids back then were like, oh, it's Christmas. Let's do all these things. And I thought, okay, I'm going to give it a try. But I was so miserable. And then
Mm.
I tried to do something to take it to work. And then my cookies were like elephant ears. And I was just like, I'm done. I was done. I had to get comfortable with saying, you know what? I'm not going to bring a baked good, but I'll participate in the party. I don't know how to bake these cookies, but I'll just buy something from the store. I had to get really comfortable with that. And it wasn't that I needed those people's permission. What I needed was to give myself permission to disappoint other people. I had to give myself the permission to be the party pooper. And
Mm.
that felt terrible. That
Yeah.
felt so hard and so bad. That's why we struggle. If we can just get comfortable with feeling all the negative feelings, which I know you and I really work with when we work with our clients, learning just to process that. It doesn't mean you need to sit for 10 minutes a day and do this whole meditation thing. Can you just recognize that this sucks and this feels hard and I really don't like it?
Yeah.
But who am I being in this moment? Do I want to keep doing this? Because the more you keep doing it, the more you can't dig yourself out of that hole. And then you're also layering those expectations on yourself. So you become your own police. And that's
Yeah.
not fair to us.
Mhm. So when we try and do all of the things, when we bake, when we don't wanna bake, and when we go to parties that we don't necessarily want to go to, what is it we're trying to feel?
Lots of things. Depends on where you're coming from. For many people, it's that sense of belonging. Again, because the
Yeah.
season's all about love and giving and togetherness. But we also forget that there are people who are going through grief and
Mm.
sadness. And because nobody wants to talk about those negative, here in quotes, with negative emotions, We feel like if I dare to feel those things, then there's something wrong with me.
Yeah.
But there's nothing wrong with anybody. It's just a human emotion. And I think when we start normalizing that, even in a season where the expectation is for everyone to be happy and joyful, it's okay to feel like you don't have those feelings. And that's not a problem. So many of us just want to feel like we belong because when you're happy, when you're joyful, people want to be around you. People want to engage with you more. And that makes you feel that sense of belonging.
Mm.
For some people, to them, that's where they find their worth in other people being around them or appreciating them for the gifts that they've given or appreciating them for their baking and their cooking.
Mhm. Yeah. So I hear you saying that we do all of these things that we don't necessarily want to do from a perceived need to fit in or a perceived need to belong.
Yeah.
But then there's all that resentment that comes from having to do all of the things and spend so much time doing things that we don't really like to do. So the fitting in almost feels kind of fake because our heart's not in it.
I know. I know. And I think this is the part that people forget. So, because I'm a people pleaser, I know this about myself. People pleasers, typically, when they're trying to think about helping people, their brain doesn't think about this resentment piece. Their brain is like, oh, we're going to feel so happy. We're going to feel so glad that people love us and all of the things our brains forget. So, we have to remind ourselves that if I do this just because I'm going to get that praise and it's going to make me feel good, there's a piece that's going to come later. Do I want to
Mhm.
deal with that? So then you get to decide if you want to feel terrible that you please that person and you're still happy with it. That's fine. It's
Mhm.
your choice, right? But you can also say, you know what? I know I don't really want to do this, but I'm going to choose to do it because it does make me feel better. Then you feel more empowered and then you don't get to complain or resent people because you made the choice.
Yeah.
This is all about us taking ownership and saying, I choose to do this and that's okay. Even though it's not convenient, even though I have to go out of my way to do it, I choose to do it and I take full ownership rather than making it sound like other people are forcing us. My client recently, we were chatting about this because she really struggled with creating boundaries. And I remember something she said. She said, when people ask me to do something, they don't know what my plate looks like. They just
Mhm.
ask. And somehow a part of them expects that I would push back if it doesn't work for me. And it is my choice to push back because they're
Yeah.
not going to do it for me. So I have to tell them it doesn't work.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh, that's a very good way to put it because sometimes we feel that other person is not going to listen. And we start creating the stories of, well, if I say no, and then they're going to get mad. And if they get mad, like we start creating this whole scenario that hasn't even happened. And
Uh-huh.
that even makes us feel more terrible. So we don't say anything. But
Right.
what if that was not all true? What if that was just your brain's way of keeping you safe and not speaking up for what you want?
Mhm.
And what if you did speak up and they got mad? And then what? But you have said your point,
Yeah.
right? And I just want to put a disclaimer here because if you find yourself in a situation where it's not safe, that's a different conversation.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
I'm just saying for the everyday, regular, you feel safe, at least for the most part, and you have some kind of autonomy to your own decision making.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, it's playing out like what is the worst that can happen here? Like you say, giving yourself permission to disappoint people. Like it's going to feel uncomfortable, most likely, but is it really going
Mm.
to be the end of a relationship or be the big catastrophe that we make it out to be in our brain? Right? Like, can you
Yeah.
authorize yourself to decide what you want, what matters for you?
Mhm.
Mhm. Okay, so let's talk about self care then over the holidays. And like I said at the beginning, how I notice this pattern with my clients around their movement and their eating behavior. It seems like there's a real push pull with women of I want to prioritize myself. I want to continue to keep moving. I know that brings me energy. I know that makes me feel good. And I have all of this other stuff going on. So I feel as though I don't have time to continue to move my body. What advice would you have for women to help them make a decision that works for them?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'm going to say I don't have this nailed down because, again, life is not constant. Things are always changing. But at the core of this, decision making is, who do you want to be in this season?
Mm-hmm.
Right? So many of us are just living life based on what people expected of us, right? If you marry into a family where maybe your spouse or your partner, their tradition is always you visit every year. And then this year it's like, well, I really just want to stay home. Who are you going to be? Right? So we need to decide, first of all, what type of woman do you want to be over the holiday? Do you want to be a woman who prioritizes her self care? And if so, what does that look like for you? There's
Mm-hmm.
some people who are happy to just not go to the gym or take care of themselves and just do the work and then they recover in the new year, which I do not recommend. But there are people who would do that and they're fine with that. So you get to decide who you want to be first.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to prioritize your self care, then it's important. And you have to keep reaffirming that it is important to you.
Mm-hmm.
That means we're going to put your to do list and we're going to run it through a very tight and critical lens. What do I want to do on this list? How is any of this helping me or impacting my self care?
Mm-hmm.
Am I willing to let that happen? Right? So let's say maybe you are going to the gym 3 days a week. Maybe you might just have to go down to two,
Yeah.
right? Just for a few weeks until whatever that is done, then
Mm-hmm.
you back
Mm-hmm.
rather than throwing everything out. I think many of
Yes.
us tend to live in this black and white thinking where it's
Yeah.
like either I do all the things or I do nothing. But
Exactly.
there's so much we can do in that gray area. And
Yeah.
that's where you decide who you want to be. Then you don't feel the pressure of, but this is what people expect of me. It's like, no, I know these are the expectations, but who do I want to be
Yeah.
in spite of all the expectations? And how do I make it work?
Yes. Very good points. Who do I want to be and how do I make it work? Right. Rather than taking care of myself, self care looks like 5 days at the gym for an hour each week, right? Where it could be, well, maybe they're 30-minute sessions at home twice a week, right? What does self care mean to you? How do you want to be throughout the holidays? What would benefit you most? And having authority to make that decision over yourself.
Oh, absolutely. I think we just need to get comfortable with telling ourselves the truth.
Yeah, so
So,
true.
so many, so many of us lie a lot. Like we're like, oh, I can just do it. But no, you can't. And it's okay to just admit that you can't do it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. Or we do it and we burn ourselves out. And then January comes and we collapse.
Exactly.
Right.
And we're looking for how to like recover, go on a vacation to recover. And I think that has just been weighing so heavily on my heart this season because I remember last year where all the moms were like, screw it, we're out of here.
Mm.
And then January came and people were like, oh, I'm going to do better this year. I'm like, no, we didn't have to do the ping pong thing where we're going to one extreme and then we're going back. No, let's just figure out who we want to be.
Yeah.
Like, quiet the noise of what society is telling you, what your mom and her Bible study friends are doing. Just like all of that.
Mhm.
And then let's just pay attention to what do I want and who do I want to be? Because when you decide within yourself, this is the kind of woman that I want to be, then you feel more empowered to teach other people how to treat you, to
Mm.
teach other people how to approach when they're asking you for things. I'll give an example because I think sometimes people are like, well, what does that look like? So, one of the things I do with my kids is if I say we're going to do something, I'll give them a time and we'll do it at that time. There are times when my daughter, my eldest daughter, she's very strong willed, which I don't have a problem with, but she knows how to push my buttons. So she'll just show up like, maybe I'm just sitting down on the couch and she's, can we do that thing now? I'm like, no. Well, you're just sitting and you're not doing anything. I have to remind her, I said, my priorities are my priority. Your priorities are yours. I don't need to prioritize what's important to you.
Mhm.
And then she'll go, oh.
Oh, right.
So I think that's the attitude we have to adopt, right? Like everyone's going to have a priority.
Mhm.
Does it necessarily have to be mine? Absolutely not.
Mm. Yeah. And you know what? When we approach life that way, like what I'm hearing is, well, then it doesn't matter if it's the holidays or any other time. right? There's no need to feel this external pressure or all this extra stress because we're just choosing how we want to show up in life in general.
Exactly. Exactly. That is the key. Remember what I said at the beginning? Someone said, this season, this is what we want people to feel. These are the behaviors that we want them to have.
Mm.
And there are people who profit from that,
Yes.
right? So you're just like seeing yourself in, let's just imagine we're all playing this game and someone's just putting all of us here and they're like, let's see how these people do. Let's just throw them into the box and see how they figure things out. So you can choose to, you know what? I'm not going to play this game. I'm just going to sit here and live my quiet life. Yes, it might seem boring. It might seem like you're not cool or whatever, but do you feel good about it?
Yeah.
And how is your health and well-being?
Mm.
That's the important thing.
Mhm. And like you say, there is so much messaging about how you're supposed to be during the holidays, what you're supposed to do, what you're supposed to buy, and what it's supposed to look like. And part of that is around consumerism, but the other part of that is diet culture is super loud at this time, right? Telling us that we need to control our bodies and we need to stay slim and all of it. So then we have that playing, that tape playing in our brain at all of the holiday parties that we're going to. And I'm sure that's contributing to the out of control feeling we seem to have around food and drinks. Would you agree?
Absolutely. I think it's a huge thing. And I'm just like laughing here because when you think about it, if you were to stop watching all the shows and listening to the media or diet culture, the messaging doesn't change over the holiday. It just gets louder.
It's just louder. Yeah.
It's just louder. But somehow, because so many of us have either been traumatized by our experiences, maybe living in a body that doesn't conform,
Mhm.
maybe as a child, you experience some kind of negative relationship with food in your family that you're growing up with. These things tend to play in the background. So
Mhm.
then we become the ones who have to watch ourselves, right? If you were the child who was the fat kid and your mom wouldn't let you have candy, guess what's going to happen? Now, mom's not here. I can eat all the candy I want. And it's the holidays. So that's a better excuse. Everyone's giving out candy. I don't have to buy. I just need to be at the party and
Mhm.
eat the candy.
Mhm.
Right. So it's so interesting because when you recognize it's the same messaging, it's just louder.
Mhm.
How can you take care of yourself
Yeah.
without playing into, again, diet culture messaging? And I'm not saying it's easy because we're all part of this system. This is the water that we're all swimming in. But what are some ways that you can just pay attention to how that's impacting your behavior? Are you
Mhm.
feeling really anxious? Are you feeling really nervous? Just pay attention. What is that trying to tell you?
Mhm.
It doesn't mean you're a bad person. It doesn't mean that you lack self control because a lot of us usually run to that. We're like, oh, I don't have self control. That's why I'm feeling this way. No, everyone feels that way sometimes.
Mhm.
They just decide, you know what? I'm not going to push myself and go overboard because of what's happening during the holiday. There was someone who was, I can't remember who I was talking to, and they gave a very interesting scenario. It's like, you love Ben and Jerry's so much. You're not going to go to Ben and Jerry's where they're not open and try to kick down the door to get the ice cream, right?
True.
No, you're not going to do that. You're just going to wait to the next day when the store is open, then you go in and get the ice cream. What if we can just try and remind ourselves, like everything that you see right now is available throughout the year. Granted,
Mhm.
there's some really festive, treats that you don't see all year round, but that's very few.
Mhm.
And how can you bring mindfulness into your consumption of these things? How can you bring mindfulness into your experience with it so that it feels good
Yeah.
rather than this thing that you can't control yourself around?
Yes. Yes, exactly. Like let it feel good, right? The reason we desire these foods is because we enjoy them. Right? And
Exactly.
I always say food is more than just the sum of its nutrients. Like some foods spark memories from our childhood or they bring us pleasure and we when we eat them, then the guilt and shame is so right on its heels that it robs us of any pleasure that we could have had in the moment, right? So
Mhm.
yeah, being able to just decide like this food is available to me. I can have it. I can enjoy it. And I don't have to get caught up in all of that diet culture drama that's going on right now. And I don't have to participate in the chatter that's going around the party table about starting our diet on January 1st and all of that, right? Like I get to decide how I want to approach these special foods.
Mhm. Oh, for sure. Oh, for sure. I think one thing that people can keep in mind is if you tend to fall on that, you know, that radar, if you tend to fall into that trap of feeling the guilt and shame, you can make decisions ahead of time. I think
Mhm.
one area where a lot of us struggle with is we always think we'll be able to overcome a situation when we get there, but we
Mhm.
don't plan. So many of us are not prepared. We think when we get there, then we're going to do the work. It's like a farmer who wants to go plant seeds and then the rain is coming and it's like, oh, I'll just wait and I see the cloud in the sky, then I'm going to go put the seeds in the ground.
Mhm.
It might be too late, right? You got
Mhm.
to get those seeds ready. If you're going to plant and make them go indoors, you got to get them ready so that when you see the clouds, it's easy to just put things out and you go ahead and have your season.
Mhm.
So before you head out, if you tend to fall into that trap of feeling guilty,
Mhm.
feeling ashamed, make a decision. If people start having this conversation, what am I going to do? This is
Mhm.
also part of that boundary. What's the boundary that I'm willing to put in place? If someone comments on my body,
Mhm.
what would I do? When you plan ahead, then your brain wants to find solutions. So even before the party starts, even before the date for the party, you've probably maybe found some resources on intuitive eating, resources on how to tell people not to talk about your body, and you start practicing ahead of time.
Mhm.
When you get there, nervous system's already used to you feeling like, oh, the party pooper and people are not happy. But guess what? You still feel confident stating your boundary because you were prepared
Mhm.
ahead of time. So I think another key thing that we need to remember is just being prepared and whatever that looks like for you, finding the resources to help yourself. And someone listening might think, well, aren't we just preparing for the worst? But we already talked about it. What's the worst case scenario, right? You can prepare ahead of time. And
Yeah.
that doesn't mean you need to figure out all the possible scenarios. You just say, what's the boundary I'm willing to put in place
Yeah.
to support myself in this season? That's all.
Yeah, it's having your back, right? Whatever could happen.
Yeah.
It's not catastrophizing the worst case
Yes.
scenario and thinking, I won't be able to handle this. I don't know what I'm going to do. It's having your back and having a plan in place so that you can stay true to your desires, your needs, honor yourself, and not fall into that guilt and shame spiral that seems automatic, but isn't.
Yeah. Yeah. And the spiral also comes from you've noticed that you're feeling guilty and ashamed, and then you judge yourself
Hmm.
for that. So even if you end up feeling a bit of that, can you give yourself grace and compassion in that moment and just recognize, like, okay, I'm feeling this, it's fine. I still love and accept myself. Instead of saying, well, I shouldn't be feeling this way. I did all the things I was told to do. I prepared and I'm still feeling this way. And that's just going to push you more into that guilt and shame spiral.
I love it. Well, this has been a really great conversation, as it always is with you, you may. So let's just sum up here. If you have, I don't know, 3 or 4, your top tips that you want to leave our listeners with on how to get through the holiday without needing a holiday from the holiday.
A lot of holidays.
Yeah, right?
Okay. I think, first of all, just recognizing what this season brings and how it's very normal for you to feel the pressure, the overwhelm, the stress, but also recognizing that you choose not to participate in the overwhelm and the stress. The power is yours.
Hmm.
Second thing I would say is just decide who you want to be in this season. And that doesn't mean you have to be the same all year round, but who do you want to be despite all of the things happening around you? That's where your power is. You can't wait for the situation to change, but you can change how you show up and respond. That's the second thing. And then the third thing is just having your back.
Hmm.
Have your back, show up, be prepared. And if you're not prepared, how can you find tools to support you? How can you find resources to help you take the best care of yourself And then finally, just get comfortable with processing your emotions. You don't have to spend hours and hours, but can you just allow and normalize that there are going to be negative emotions? Negative again here in quote, because those emotions are still valuable. But can you allow them and not let that stop you from doing what you want to do? I think those would be my four tips.
I think those are great tips. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom today. I know that this is going to really land well with our listeners, and they'll have some really good, tangible things to work with that are going to help them get through this season without all that stress and overwhelm.
Thank you, Kim. It's always fun chatting with you.
Well, it's truly my pleasure. Was there anything else that's pressing on your heart that you wanted to share today?
I just want to remind people, like, this is just one season in a year.
Mm-hmm.
Have fun. Have fun. We, as adults, we've forgotten what it looks like to have fun. It's always about other people. But can you imagine just like having fun and being playful and happy with yourself by yourself? That's the message I want people to like gravitate towards. How can you have fun with yourself this season?
I'm so glad you said that at the end, because as soon as you did, I kind of lit up and went, oh, yeah, I get to have fun over the holidays.
Yeah.
So it's pretty easy to forget that we get to do that too.
Yeah. Yeah. Not just for the kids. Well, in my case, as a mom, I think that's where my kids always think it's all about them. I'm like, no.
Yeah,
It's season 2.
exactly. All right. Well, why don't you just finish us off by telling our listeners how they can stay in touch with you and where they can find you? Because I know they're going to want to keep in touch.
Absolutely. So since we're on a podcast, with me on my podcast, the Thriving Mom Podcast, new episodes air every Sunday. You can also come check out my work and learn more about me at oliveandbliss.ca. And that's the same thing I use. My social media handles are Olive and Bliss Wellness, but I'm sure you'll have all that information.
Yes, so definitely will. I'll put everything in the show notes so you can follow up. Thank you so much, Unyime, for being on the show today. You just always have so much wisdom to share, and I enjoy learning from you, and I know that it's going to be really valuable for our listeners as well. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Kim.
Thanks for tuning into the Power in Motion podcast today. If you love what you're learning here, then I invite you to take the next step of embodying these concepts into your own life so that you can live your healthiest, happiest life and never again feel held back by your body. Coaching is the fastest, most efficient pathway to taking what you know in your head to actually applying it and seeing results. Whether you're looking to make changes around movement, food, body image, or all three, I'm here to help you nurture a kind, respectful, and trusting relationship with your body so you can feel your very best. Click the link in the show notes to book a free consultation, and together we'll uncover what's getting in the way of you having the results you want. You'll leave this call knowing exactly what you need to work on, and together we'll explore whether one of my coaching offers is a good fit for you. I can't wait to meet you.